Our story continues. Chapter 3. In a place that was not a place, the black-shrouded figure stared beyond his empty surroundings into that realm called sanctuary by the knowledgeable few. He noted the terrible strife overtaking the city of Toraja and had already begun calculating the possible repercussions.
He is moving too quickly,
the shadowed man said to the emptiness.
Too irrationally.
He moves as he must, as do we.
The voice would have stilled the heart of most, for it was as much presence as it was sound. Yet, the one to whom it spoke merely nodded, for he had known the speaker so long that even its uniqueness had become too familiar. Failure had also become too familiar, and he did not want to face it again. Failure threatened the balance, and despite centuries of learning to focus his emotions inward, where they could be controlled, a deep frown slowly spread across his marble-like countenance.
Then, we must become more active.
As he spoke, above him there suddenly glittered what seemed to be stars. Yet these stars moved, gradually forming an immense, serpentine figure, a creature half seen, half imagined, and to most, completely myth. A dragon.
More active than the initiating of his birth brother,
the stars asked, the tone invoking irony.
More,
the shrouded figure returned defiantly.
Although Mendeln ul Diomed is far exceeding my expectations, I would almost swear that he
is directly of your blood. Yes. It would also explain why she chose the elder sibling for her goals. You sensed the strength slumbering in them, so would she.
My mother would. You're correct. So too would my father.
His frown deepened.
Yes, so too would my father.
The stars swirled, briefly losing resemblance to the fabled beast.
Of whom we have heard nothing.
Yes, and that troubles me more than anything.
As it should.
The shape coalesced again.
Yes, a more active role must be taken, just as you have said.
Wrapping his voluminous cloak about him, the hooded figure prepared to leave.
As I said,
he murmured, more to himself than his vaguely seen companion.
Even if it means revealing my survival to both my parents.
Mendeln expected to die. He watched as the hammer fell, knowing that he would never move swiftly enough to escape it. None of the words in the strange tongue that he had begun to learn in his dreams came to him. A crushing death was to be his imminent fate, and although he tried to be as detached to that realization as he had become to so many other fateful moments of late, Mendeln nonetheless felt an overwhelming bitterness. He had believed that some other destiny awaited him. Someone collided with him. Both figures tumbled to the side just as Diolan's hammer smashed into the marble floor, creating a fissure of broken stone more than half a dozen yards in length.
Next time, don't dream, act,
muttered Cerinthia in his ear. She leapt to her feet before Odyssean's brother could offer any kind of thanks, and with good reason. Diolan's effigy turned on her, almost as if, despite the unreadable expression, the statue was furious at Cerinthia for taking from it its prey. Cerinthia took aim with her spear, throwing it with accuracy enhanced by her powers. It drove through the giant's chest, much the way Odyssean had earlier sent the arrow through the priests. At first, Mendeln thought her heroic action had been all for nothing, for Diolan moved unperturbed by the gap in its torso. After all, it was only animated stone. But then fine cracks quickly spread forth from the hole, racing along until they covered the statue's body with what looked almost like a web. As the effigy raised its hammer, portions of the giant began breaking off. Cerinthia gave out a warning cry to those in the vicinity of Diolan. They backed away just in time, for the hand wielding the murderous tool chose that moment to break off. As even the statue itself watched, both dropped to the floor, shattering in pieces that spread throughout the chamber. No sooner had Diolan lost its hand than the rest of the limb followed. That opened the floodgates, huge chunks of the stone Goliath dropping like rain. The effigy looked down at its crumbling body, and the neck snapped. As the head crashed in front of Mendeln and Cerinthia, what was left of Diolan joined the wreckage. But there were two other giants with which to contend. Two giants making savage sweeps across the chamber as they hunted the tinier figures. However, Mendeln gave thanks to whatever watched over the humans, for despite their attempts, the behemoths were having little good luck since the initial slaughter. He wondered at that until he saw the hand of Mephis bounce off the air just before Romus, and a small band of Parthans and Taragians. The bearded man, a villain reformed by Odyssean, looked to be the guiding force of this group. He stared at the menacing figure, almost seeming to defy it to break through. There was still a good chance that it might just do that. Mendeln decided that it was time he lent his hand to the matter rather than stand around gaping while others merely struggled to survive. The shadowy gift that he had been granted had to be of some use now. Words finally flowed into his head. Words in that archaic language first glimpsed on the stone just outside of Sarum. They were the ones Mendeln knew that he had to speak, and so Odyssean's brother did just that. Hands formed into fists. The statue battered at the invisible barrier. Yet, as the first blows struck, the giant was repelled. Cracks materialized in the giant body, and chips broke off as if something unseen had fought against the effigy with the same violence with which the latter had attacked Romus's band. Mendeln allowed himself the ghost of a satisfied smile. Undeterred by the damage to it, Mephis renewed its assault, yet each hit caused more and more damage. Driven by whatever dark force had animated it, the giant would not cease. It did not understand that the magic Mendeln somehow knew was making it the instrument of its own destruction. Romus, on the other hand, evidently understood. He gestured for those with him to remain calm and wait out the situation. The statue of Mephis was strong, and that tremendous strength, turned on itself, quickly reduced the giant to a precarious state. At last, great portions of the statue already piled around its feet. Mephis collapsed. That left only Bala, or it would have, if the third of the great statues had not suddenly frozen. The robed figure, in the act of leaning down to swat 3 Taragians with the tablets, teetered, then tipped over. But Bala did not fall in the direction his balance would have demanded. Rather than plunge forward toward his would-be victims, the effigy went against common sense and dropped backward. Only as it smashed to pieces on the floor did the reason for its sudden and peculiar destruction become obvious. Odyssean, his aspect even more grim than Mendeln's, stepped through the immense pile of shattered stone, the path ever clearing ahead of him. Mendeln did not like what he read in his older brother's eyes. He did not make it clear to Cerinthia that Odyssean faced not merely a pair of demons, but Lilith herself. Had she known that, the merchant's daughter would have attempted to plunge in ahead of even the demoness's former lover. After all, Lilith was as guilty, if not more so, in the death of Achilleus than Lucian, who had merely been the physical cause. Lilith it had been who had drawn all of them into this. Lilith, whose memory would no doubt tear at Odyssean's heart until he was dead. Mendeln's brother glared at the losses caused by the statues. Damn her. Fortunately, Cerinthia had turned to help one of the injured. That gave the siblings a moment to confer. Nothing was resolved, Mendeln offered.
Nothing.
Odyssean continued to survey the dead.
Too many.
The younger brother refrained from making any comment. He understood that his own recent opinions concerning death did not always sit well with Odyssean. What sounded like a great rumble of thunder shook the temple. Odyssean glanced up, his expression hardening yet further.
The fires and other damage have taken their own toll. The temple's about to collapse.
He stepped past Mendeln.
Leave now!
He shouted to the rest.
Our task is done here.
It was a measure of the utter command Odyssean had that no one even hesitated. The dead were left where they were. It was not that they were so readily forgotten, just that the survivors knew that their leader would not have ordered them out without good reason. Some helped in carrying the wounded away, whom Odyssean would surely attempt to heal later. Mendeln turned his gaze back to his brother, and his studious gaze noted a sudden strain in the other's expression. Odyssean.
I said that we all need to leave now.
Odyssean's voice remained even, but the vein in his neck had begun throbbing. There was a second rumble, but much more muted. Mendel noted an increase in the throbbing. As you say, he finally replied as calmly as possible. But the doors are sealed.
No, not anymore.
Mendel took his brother's reply as truth, and, sure enough, he turned just in time to see the formerly sealed doors fling themselves open, just as the first of Odyssean's followers reached them. None of the others questioned this. They had the utmost faith that he would see them through anything.
They need to move faster.
Odyssean growled under his breath. Nodding, Mendel increased his pace. Do not lag, he called to the rest. Be wary, but swift. From farther on, Cerinthia caught his eye. Her own gaze informed Mendel that she understood the truth concerning the situation. Like Odyssean's sibling, she did her utmost to quietly usher out the others. Another rumble briefly shook the temple. Cracks appeared in the walls and ceiling, but otherwise, the edifice remained fairly intact. The only fragments on the floor were the result of the earlier conflicts. Mendel felt the warm air rush at him as he neared the outside. Aware of what they faced, he counted each step as if they were as important as the beats of his heart. It would have been simple to tell the others to run, to flee from the area before it was too late, but that would have only caused more calamity. Flames illuminated the outdoors. In their awful light, Mendel glimpsed some other parts of Taraja. The tree-lined streets were most obvious, their foliage the home of the Circa, small simians revered by the populace. There were also the tall, rounded buildings with their columns carved to resemble one powerful beast standing atop another. The work was so intricate that some of the animals seemed to be gazing in concern at the conflagration surrounding them. In truth, there would be no stopping the fire from consuming the immediate district. Not that Odyssean would have cared. The Circa had long fled the area, and everything else here bore the mark of the Triune. The mix of Parthans and Taragians spilled out beyond the temple grounds. Mendel finally took a glance back at the giant structure. Only to his eye was the constant quivering evident in the dark. Flames now covered most of the roof. Crevasses ran over the face of the building, and no doubt lined every other part of it as well. Some columns farther on had cracked in half and fallen down. A major fault ran across the base of the western side. It should have collapsed by now, he decided. It should have collapsed on our heads. But it had not, and the taut-faced figure coming up next to him was the sole reason why. Sweat poured over Odyssean, and his breathing came in rapid gasps. His gaze darted left and right, as if he sought to take account of everyone. No one remains behind, Mendel assured him. No one living, that is. Even the last of the brethren have fled.
Into the jungle. If they know what's good for them.
Odyssean managed to grate. He stood there, obviously weighing his decision. It is safe to let go, his brother softly assured. Nodding, Odyssean exhaled. With a terrible roar and a wrenching of stone from stone, the Tarajian temple caved in on itself. Massive blocks of marble tumbled into the courtyard. Bursts of flame shot up into the night as the open air fed their fury. Gasps arose from several of Odyssean's followers. Romus let out an oath. Huge chunks of marble continued to spill over the area, yet none of them came close to where the band stood. Even now, some of Mendeln's brother kept the devastation in check. Finally, it began to settle down to a mere catastrophe. The fires continued to burn, but the ruins now surrounded them in such a manner that they would not spread much farther. Again, Mendeln knew that this could be no coincidence. Odyssean looked past Mendeln, who at the same time sensed what lay behind him. As he turned, the rest became aware of the mass of figures filling the streets. The bulk of Taraja's remaining citizenry stood before Odyssean and his flock, and in that crowd, Mendeln noted a variety of emotions. A grand figure in flowing red and golden robes separated from the crowd. He wore a scarf over his long, bound, silver-colored hair and an intricate gold ring in one nostril. The sunburst design of the ring indicated his high status. The man was lanky and appeared old enough to be the brother's father. In his left hand, he clutched a tall staff with markings etched in silver running along its length.
I seek the stranger from the highlands, the Athenian called Odyssean.
Athenian was, Mendeln's party had discovered early on, the term the jungle folk used for the pale inhabitants of such regions as Sarum and Partha. The actual meaning was lost even to the locals, but it had come to mean anyone with skin and looks akin to the son of Diomedes. Odyssean did not hesitate to reveal himself. Although a few of his converts gave verbal protest at this, their fear for him was not unwarranted. In addition to the leather-padded soldiers, Mendel noted among the newcomers, there were certainly representatives of the mage clans in the vicinity. They were keeping discreet, though for although Mendel knew that they were there, not once did he see anyone who resembled one of the powerful spellcasters. They had their own internal matters with which they sought to deal. Odyssean was not yet a problem to the jaded masters in Kajan. But after tonight, Mendel suspected that they would be reassessing their stand.
Odyssean, son of Diomedes, stands before you with empty hands.
Mendel's sibling replied, with the same respectful formality. The elder nodded.
I am Rauneth, Counselor Senior of Taraja, speaker for the people.
He paused, obviously noting the many darker faces among those following Odyssean.
But not for all, it seems. There are many known to me among those who stand with you, Athenian, a fact that is a marvel and a concern. I was told that only the lower castes found your word of interest, and that you promised them the riches of those whose stations are well above.
I promise the same thing to everyone,
Odyssean interjected, his tone only slightly hinting of the anger Mendel knew he held against those who had spread such rumors to the Counselor Senior.
The chance to achieve what we were meant to be, regardless of our birth. I offer something more than even kings can attain, Lord Rauneth. If one will just listen, I offer what the Triune and the Cathedral would never desire for their flocks. Independence from their utter mastery.
Rauneth nodded again. His thin lips pursed, and it was evident that he did not entirely like or dislike what he had heard.
The Triune has these past nights been accused of dire crimes, the least of which are too horrendous for me to declare openly here, Athenian. I have proof from sources as well that you are a danger to the lives of those over whom I watch.
You want more damning proof of the Triune's crimes, Counselor Senior? It lies within those runes, preserved despite the collapse.
For the first time, Lord Rauneth looked uncertain. Mendeln, too, was impressed. If he understood his brother as the other did, then even though Uldisian had let the temple finally fall, he had still shielded the inner chambers from the tons of tumbling stone. An astonishing feat, and one done for good reason, it now seemed.
Perhaps that may be the case,
Rauneth finally went on.
but that does not in itself excuse the case against you, Uldisian, son of Diomedes.
Uldisian's no villain, came a voice that sounded much like Romus's. Something flew out of the dark, aiming right for Lord Rauneth's unprotected forehead. The Counselor Senior only had time to gape as the projectile reached him, and halted just before it would have shattered his skull.
I'm sorry, my lord,
Uldisian muttered, sounding incredibly exhausted. The makeshift missile, a sharp, apple-sized fragment from some corner of the temple, crumbled. A pile of soft ash formed at Rauneth's sandaled feet.
By
the elder man began, then clamped his mouth. Mendeln suspected that, like many Turajians, he had likely been about to call upon the three, Mephis, Bala, and Dialan. It had been pure reflex, though Lord Rauneth not radiating any of the darkness that true converts of the Triune would have. He had been an innocent dupe like the rest.
I'm sorry,
Uldisian repeated. He turned toward his followers. Although his eyes swept across the entire throng, his brother had no doubt that the one who had used his power to hurtle the missile now felt as if Uldisian's entire focus was upon him.
Let that never happen again. This isn't the point of the gift we have. To fight for the truth, yes. To fight for our right to be what we are destined to be, yes. But not for mayhem and murder. Then we're no better than the Triune.
He returned his gaze to the Counselor Senior, who only now looked up from the ash. To his credit, Lord Rauneth's momentary gaping when he had seen his death approaching had given way again to determination to protect his city and his people. Uldisian spoke before the other man could.
We're leaving Toraja, my lord. For the rest of the night, we'll camp beyond the walls. Tomorrow, we'll be gone. I came here to try to do some good. But that good's now mixed with something you and I both find distasteful. That's not what I want. That's not what I ever want.
The Counselor Senior bowed his head slightly.
You are beyond my power, Asinian. For you to leave Toraja in no more devastation than what has been wrought this night, I can only thank the stars. No soldier shall raise a weapon to you or those who choose to follow you out, not if they do not wish to answer to me. I will brook no more bloodshed.
One thing only, Lord Rauneth.
The man looked wary.
The Triune is no more here. If it grows in Toraja again, like a weed can, I'll return.
Once more, Rauneth pursed his lips.
If the evil is as you said, that weed I will personally pluck clean from my city's soil.
That appeared to satisfy Mendeln's brother. Uldisian did not look at his followers. He merely started toward Lord Rauneth, and they, in turn, flowed behind him. The larger mass that had accompanied the Counselor Senior quickly gave way. Hundreds of eyes, watching with as many emotions as the converts, several of them once friends, neighbors, and family, passed through. The Torajians among Uldisian's flock eyed their fellow locals with equal intensity, although in their case they radiated the determination of the newly converted. No one was going to tell them that they might have chosen wrong. The counselor senior bowed his head again as Odyssean reached him. The latter nodded in turn. Neither spoke, words now past use. Mendeln surreptitiously eyed the Tarajian leader. Rauneth was an interesting figure himself. Ghosts flocked around the man, but whether family or foes, there was not time enough to determine. That so many did was all that mattered. It bespoke of Rauneth's strong presence. Had the man chosen to follow so many of his citizens in accepting the gift within, Mendeln suspected that Rauneth would have quickly become one of Odyssean's most promising candidates so far. And perhaps that is good reason to be glad he did not join, the younger brother considered. Rauneth had been a leader. He might chafe at having to follow. The crowd continued to give way. Even among the soldiers, there was a mix of expressions. Some looked full of distrust, others full of curiosity. "We will grow in numbers," it occurred to Mendeln. Likely Odyssean knew this as well. "We will grow in numbers, even before we leave this throng behind." There would be others too, who would sneak out during the night to join the camp beyond the walls. Mendeln calculated that not only would all the lives lost tonight be gained back, but that 10 times that quantity would be added yet.
"So many,"
he murmured.
"Yes, so many,"
Odyssean replied. At that moment, whatever their own personal changes, the brothers understood one another absolutely. They both acknowledged the growth of what Odyssean had started, acknowledged that each day would bring more and more into the fold, and both knew as well that all those added souls might yet not be enough, that everyone here and everyone to come might simply end up dead.